Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show to talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Season 10, Episode 5 of The Blacklist. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we have Reddington stopping by Herbie's place. It seems like he's actually going to be staying there for a little while, but I don't know if that's just going to be like his permanent, like, oh, I'm going to chill here for a while. This is going to be where I'm going to stay anytime I'm back in New York type of situation, because he said, like, oh, while I'm here, I'm going to end up, like, immediately leaving afterwards. So, you know, because even Herbie was like, oh, yeah, I could, like, set the place up for you and stuff like that. I mean, he mainly came there because Herbie had something he wanted to talk about, but, I mean, maybe he was just staying there for a little while. But either way, Herbie's working on the case that we get introduced at the beginning of the episode where Judge Dockery ends up getting murdered after having a big revelation, and it seems like everything points to, like, a pretty big crime family. I think they're just the Brunos is what the family is. Or maybe the son's name is Bruno. Whatever the case may be, this crime family, the head of the family, the father, is already, like, in jail. He's serving, like, a life sentence or whatever. And then his son was accused of killing Judge Dockery, but Herbie doesn't believe he's the one that did it, because even Reddington's like, yeah, doesn't, like, dish served cold is kind of how this family would roll, in particular the father would roll. So, like, the son doing this might be a little hot-headed, but to go to this extreme to do something like this with Dockery doesn't seem like it's the case. This episode was really interesting. I mean, first and foremost, like, it's not like a true blue, like, blacklisters situation. I mean, once again, it's not like this show hasn't had episodes without blacklisters, but I thought this was such an interesting episode, especially because it's kind of a murder mystery, which, I mean, yes, the show in its entirety is a crime drama and mystery, and there's a murder mystery element to it, but this was one of those episodes where you typically know who the bad guy is, like, during these episodes. It's just always about the team finding out who it is. This is a situation where we didn't know who the killer was, and it's us unraveling who they are and figuring it out. So that's what made this episode kind of unique in that regard. Once again, there's 9 other seasons of something exactly like this has probably happened, but I don't remember. I remember some of the, but obviously the show's very, like, one-off with some of its cases. Obviously there's the overarching stories I remember, but never, like, a lot of, like, major, like, blacklisters, because typically they're one episode off characters, with the exception of those who pop up later on, or those who have two-parters, or like I said, who themselves had, like, little mini arcs over the course of the series, or if not major arcs over the course of the series. So, I mean, I guess the biggest murder mystery was, like, the whole who was actually responsible for Liz's death, and it being Martin. I guess that's, like, probably one of the bigger ones, but I mean, once again, they've had an overarching mission. Like I said, I just thought this was such an interesting episode. Like I said, maybe that's just me being stupid in that regard of, like, oh, it's not that unique, Michael. I don't know. I thought it was structurally so interesting how they went about this episode. But yeah, especially because they have to, the team has to kind of go against, like, what was it, like the NYPD or whatever. Like, there's a detective who is a friend with the judge who ended up finding her body, and, like, I mean, for one, they're taking down a crime family, so this is kind of a win, but the problem is, like, the FBI's kind of here undermining, like, this case, because at the end of the day, the son didn't do it. Even though the crime family's son, like I said, I can't remember if the family's name is Bruno or if his name is just Bruno. Whatever the case may be, the junior is getting accused of everything when in actuality he didn't do it. So, and I do love how involved in this episode Herbie is, because obviously it's like, yeah, let's talk to Herbie, but let's not let him know our association. I love when Sia's like, hey, you're the associate of our associate. It's like, wait, how'd you get all these files? He's like, I've been asking for these for a while. It's like, yeah, just, really quick with my hands and stuff like that. I love that. And just see his interactions with him. And it's like, oh, he's playing, like, foosball as a sport now. And it's like, wait, there's a tournament for it? He's like, I'm tired of always having to explain myself to people about foosball being the sport that it is. And it's like, wow. Not only is he a nerdy forensic guy, he's also playing in a foosball tournament, and apparently he is married to a super hot punk rocker. And it's like, yeah, obviously the wrestler's like, I'm in the wrong line of business if that's how things kind of worked out on his front. But I I also skipped over, but I also thought it was interesting why Herbie went to Reddington in the first place. Like, he needed advice on what to do, because it's like, right, he's representing the criminal family in this regard. Like, that criminal family's like defense attorney asked Herbie to look over the evidence, but it also means like, hey, it puts me at odds with cops, especially because the cops feel that this is such an open and shut case. This can cause me issues later on. So luckily, Reddington had the task force to kind of back him up once again, without him really knowing the ins and outs about all of this. It's like, yeah, that disconnect of like, yeah, oh yeah, this is hey, it's Sia, and here with Harold and Donald, we're associates of Sia's. You know, it's like we'll kind of leave it at that without really getting it. It's like wanting to keep the anonymity of their connection, their true connection to Red and everything, because obviously considering their I mean, he doesn't have to worry about it because he's not a criminal. He's, you know, he works. Like, he has a job as a forensic scientist person stuff. So it's like, it's not like he's on the more criminal side of things, but the last thing you need less and less people to know about your connection to Red, especially considering how Woojin is currently weaponizing that against Reddington. So either way, they ended up kind of wondering, like, okay, could it be someone else that's connected to all of this? Could there be some other case that Judge Dockery was looking into or was a part of that might have come back to bite her, and that's the person responsible? They went through a lot of people, and it seemed like, like everyone seemed like pretty okay with the judge after everything. There was one guy that was like kind of frauding money. He's a dentist or whatever, and he would kind of give fillings even though he didn't need to, like, just for like this, I don't know, like he kind of lost himself in like the lie and all the fraud of what he was doing. But now he's like, oh, I had like an ayahuasca situation, and I, you know, plus the judge, like her like her judgment in my case actually led me down a better path. Like, that's how a lot of those people are kind of looking at it. Like, it all worked out in the end. The main person in particular ends up being the guy who ends up being the killer. That was kind of an interesting twist on his development, especially because he was so gung-ho being like, nah, we were actually going to be in business together and stuff like that. Because someone had found out that, oh yeah, because like the crime family was following her, trying to find any dirt, because if they can find any dirt on her, like, oh, she buys drugs, this or that, they could use that to kind of like undo her rulings and stuff like that, because it's like, hey, this judge isn't so squeaky clean, how can we trust her, type of thing, or kind of blackmail her in that regard, because it's like, it'd be better to use her in that regard rather than straight up killing her. You know, it's like, if I wanted her dead, we could have had that done before I even got locked up. But it's like, no, we're going to handle this a different way. You know, last thing we need to do is be caught up on, you know, bumping off a judge. I thought it was interesting when it seemed like, focusing back on the killer himself, like when the episode like kind of deviated a little bit and kind of focused heavily on what he was doing, like he's having like with this lady and stuff, and she's asking about his family. I'm like, this seems so interesting that it just feel like it kind of cut, like it almost felt like a scene from a different show, because obviously Wrestler and Sia were going to go talk to him about stuff, but it seemed so interesting to me, just the way that was kind of done. But this also makes sense because he was the killer, but we also hadn't spent any time with him over the course of the episode. Because this all goes back to a girl named Emma who went missing, and that guy was kind of the suspect in the case, but he was acquitted. But the father never let that go. It's like he had sent a threatening letter to the judge, and it's like, well, Wrestler and Sia had to look into it because it's right, the judge ended up dead. But it's like, right, the mother has a necklace that says Emma. She couldn't find a necklace with her own name, so she used it as kind of like, hey, I'm going to keep my daughter's name here. You know, I get a chain that says her name, and she has a matching one that says her name as well. And that was never found, because Emma herself was never found. So it is that judicial thing of like reasonable doubt. Like, there was nothing like conclusive enough to say that he actually did something to Emma. But then they found these white flowers, like a picture of them, and it was kind of something Emma liked or whatever. But then they go and see that it's exactly at Judge Dockery's death too, and I'm like, okay. And Herbie ended up looking into them, and it turns out that basically the little glow or whatever it was on those flowers, it's a byproduct of decomposing bodies, kind of give it this unique look that can be seen from far away. And then Wrestler looks, and there's like a garden full of them, like around a tree, and you're like, oh boy. It's like, how many bodies are down there? Who knows? They ultimately ended up finding, at the point Sia said, like, we found 3, but who knows how many more. I was like, oh, this guy's a serial killer. And especially when they find out one of them was his mom, I was like, okay, so we're dealing with our stereotypical serial killer thing of any issues he had with his mom, any woman that kind of fit that description, he ended up killing them, and that's what Emma represented. But yeah, his mom, he has mommy issues. His mom wasn't really there for him. His dad was, but she was off spending time with other people and being there and work. She was less of a mother to him, and when his father was driven to basically unalive himself, she didn't even show up at the funeral, so he held so much resentment for her, so he ultimately ended up killing her. And he even saying, like, the only nourishing thing she's ever done in her life is her dead body nourishing those flowers. You're like, Jesus. And so when he talks about killing the judge, it's like, he didn't kill her, as he calls her, Allie. It's like, no, it wasn't because she was like, in fact, she was so different from my mother. And it's like, the fact is you kind of have to even state that. Like, oh, she wasn't like those other harlots. She was different. Like, she's not like that harpy that was my mother. It's like, the fact that he had to kind of like bring that up of, hey, she's nothing like my mother, kind of speaks volumes. But the reason why he killed Judge Dockery is because she found Emma's necklace in his nightstand. And she remembered the case, and she went back to her office and saw it. Yep, it's the exact same necklace. Because I think she remembered it coming up in the case being like, right, Emma had a necklace, a matching necklace to her mom's necklace that, you know, both said Emma. And he ended up killing her. And even that twisted notion of like, yeah, but even at the end, even when she found out what I was, as, you know, what I did, I could see it in her eyes. She still loved me. It's like, Jesus. Because he was also very psychotic with, like, he was drugging a woman. And the fact of the matter is, and had her laying in his bed when Sia and Wrestler showed up. And he was like, oh yeah, he was so calm and collected. You're like, man, this guy is super psychotic. But yeah, he was a killer. I was like, that was such an interesting development. I would have never expected that. I mean, they did introduce like that element of like, hey, some of my people found her coming out of a hotel like sometimes, like, and she'd have a smile on her face. Now, you know, so they knew like there was like a boyfriend angle to it, but the cop was kind of like, yeah, we looked into that and nothing came of it. Ultimately ended up being like a key, crucial piece of this, because this guy, the killer, ended up being said boyfriend, and he killed her because like, hey, there was no talking her down. Like, you know, it's like, so like I said, I thought that was just such an interesting development. So we had that side of things. We also had the situation with Robert, who has his meeting with Wu Jing this episode. And Wu Jing is like, okay, let me tell you the truth about who Reddington is. Which Robert kind of gave Red a lot of, like, slapping, like, oh, you heard about Elizabeth Keene and stuff like that. What about Dembe? Dembe's literally, like, was Reddington's right-hand guy. He's literally a cop now. It's also like any good criminal worth their salt is going to have connections. Even like, oh, the fact is you can have, like, literally the FBI on your side, like, that's a testament to Red as a criminal. But Wu Jing is like, no, it's more so that not really like they're working for him. It's more so like he's working for them, using his connection to send criminals like us to jail. That's what happened to me. Who'd you hear this from? It's like, well, Martin. It's like, well, Martin let his in. He kind of made it seem like, oh, like Reddington was responsible for that. It's like, no, Martin was, because Martin unalived himself. You know, so, because he did what he needed to do, and now he doesn't have to face the consequences for what he did, because, maybe, yeah, because like I said, if I'm remembering correctly, I'm pretty sure Martin unaligned himself, so you're kind of like, Red doesn't kind of get his revenge on everything that you did, but, you know, Martin was kind of backed into a corner at that point in time, and everything came crumbling down, but still, you know. But Wu Jin, once again, is trying to gather allies of everyone that's ever been screwed over by Red and his circumstances of working with the FBI. That's what this whole, like, the last episode, I figured that's what this was all about. It's like you're trying to get Robert. But Reddington tried to smooth that over by breaking you out of prison because he's trying to bolster his ranks of allies. He's also up to something else because he's like, oh yeah, this something's got to be built. He's looking for a place, like, earlier in the season. I'm like, Red's doing something in the background we have no idea about because he's so insulated right now. Dembe obviously has no idea. The typical squad isn't around him enough to be like, yo, what's going on here? Like, what's Red up to? No one knows because Red's keeping this super low key into himself. I guess when it's a situation of like all your allies are about to potentially turn into enemies if Wu Jing continues down his path with war. So Robert confronts Reddington, and I love just like how stoic he is. He's like, really? And what did you say? And just like kept this like very calm, cool, and collected look. And it's like, well, what do you have to say? Reddington takes off his shades and his glasses and sits down. We cut back later on to Robert talking to Wu Jin. It's like, yeah, he tried to explain himself, but he admitted to everything that you claimed he was. And it's like, yeah, let's do it. Let's take him down. But immediately you're like, okay. So I wondered if Red, like, because I figured Red, because he even told Harold, don't worry about the Wu Jing situation. I'm handling that in kind of my own way. I figured Robert was going to play a role in that. Robert's supposed to be the inside guy. Now, whether Reddington's going to get multiple people on the inside to destroy Wu Jing's operation from the inside, or whether it's just going to be Robert as his, I mean, this is going to be the performance of Robert's lifetime, you know, because it's like, if Wu Jing finds out that Robert's still loyal to Reddington, it's like, oh, you're going to end up dead. Like, this whole thing is a ploy. Like, Reddington probably did explain everything to him. I'm curious, how much did Red explain to Robert? Like, who Liz was, why this all started to begin with, the Blacklist. This was supposed to be, you know, what it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be Liz's legacy. This was, you know, how far did Red go through explaining this, and maybe even explaining his counterattack against Wu Jing and everything that he's got going on? I have no idea. Like, we probably won't find out till super late in the season when the twist happens of, oh, Robert isn't on Wu Jing's side, he's on Red's side. There's probably, I mean, that might come up sooner than I think, but once again, who knows how that'll play out for Robert. Maybe Robert will get out of this scot-free, or he'll end up dead. I don't know, but that's also, once again, Red was future-proofing, hey, I need allies on my side, and I don't want Wu Jing to get to Robert before I can, but also you need an actor of his caliber, because you need him for the, once again, the performance of the lifetime to kind of infiltrate Wu Jing's group. So we'll ultimately have to wait to see where all that ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. I saw the episode title ahead of time. I do believe it's like it's a two-parter episode. So how that plays out with this whole Wu Jing situation, if it's directly connected, if it's its own thing that is tangentially connected, or whether it's like fully connected, we'll ultimately have to wait to see. But I'm excited to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.